Isaac Sederbaum, who also goes by Izzy, has been upgraded to satisfactory condition at Harborview Medical Center. While he's improving, his mom, who lives out of state, says the family is overwhelmed by the attention. The two cyclists attacked by the Cougar last weekend are both known for their advocacy work in the cycling community. 31-year-old Isaac Sederbaum survived the attack. According to his family, Sederbaum is a social science researcher. His LinkedIn profile shows he works for the Vera Institute in Seattle. His mother says Harborview doctors are keeping an eye on any possible infections from the mauling. According to his appointment to Seattle's Bicycle Advisory Board in 2013, the avid cyclist wanted to bring down barriers of entry to women and people of color and wants all types of riders to feel safe on their streets. When Sederbaum escaped the mountain lion and found cell reception, he called 911 expressing grave concern for his friend who didn't make it out, 32-year-old S.J. Brooks, who founded the Seattle chapter of Friends on Bikes.
In October.
Seattle bike blog editor Tom Fucolero interviewed Brooks last fall.
Just about biking in general and what could be done to make biking more inclusive.
For the article, Brooks talked about an interest to create a community where women, trans, and non-binary people of color can have fun on their bikes.
And I had this 3-word quote that SJ said that was, "Everybody bikes differently." And that was sort of a really wonderful summation of, I think, what bike advocacy should be all about. You know, it's not like there's one kind of person who bikes and they're not all biking for the same reasons.
The two cyclists were out last weekend sharing a passion for what they both believed in when a predator crossed their path. The King County Sheriff's Office said the family identified Brooks as a woman, Sonia J. Brooks. We've been contacted by a number of people who said Brooks was a member of the transgender community and wanted to be referred to with the pronouns they and them. In the newsroom, Alyssa Hahn, King 5 News.